Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is CJ, aka CJ the User, and I hope you had a good Christmas so far, or Hanukkah, or Kwanzaa, or whatever you celebrate. Either way, I hope you've had a good holiday so far. I know I have. But before the year ends, I wanted to talk about something that's been on my mind lately, especially with how abysmal social media is now. And it's not just one, it's multiple of them. You've got YouTube, you've got Twitch, I guess Facebook to a lesser extent, or Major with all the AI content that's on there. Never mind the fact that TikTok is causing the majority of brain rot these days. It's hard to really find a platform that's not garbage. But there is one more, or so it's been foretold. I know you've heard of it, I know you've seen it, it's all over the news, and since it's been taken over, it's been quite the doozy. Ladies and gentlemen, who can forget Twitter/X? Yes, Elon Musk. Whenever I hear about him these days, usually it's with plenty of disdain for the man, especially when it comes to his recent involvement in politics, with him now being involved with Trump in some sort of capacity that even Trump isn't sure of either. But on the other side of the spectrum, I see that this other half wants nothing more than to suck on his toes. He's certainly a prominent figure whether you hate his guts or want him to bend you over. Me, on the other hand, I don't really care about what Musk is up to, just like any other regular person feels whenever he's brought up, just with a simple shrug. To tell you the truth, I've got a friend who likes nothing more than to dump all over Elon for very specific things that make sense on paper, but don't really seem to affect your average person on a day-to-day basis. Sure, if you're chronically online, it's a shame he's led Twitter astray by paywalling a lot of its features, while making the freemium user experience completely ass, or that he's decided to give a voice to the right-leaning side of the political spectrum that normally would be shunned pre-Elon Musk purchasing it outright. But what does that do for your regular Joe? Not a whole lot. Your uncle who fixes cars for a living might know about a Tesla, but it doesn't really matter because he's probably fixing cars from the 1980s for a living anyways.
But CJ, I thought you use social media.
Well, it's true. I'm not really a regular person since I use a lot of these social media platforms to share my content, like with this recent Juno render I did a few days ago. Heck, I'm even a Twitter Blue member myself, or an X member, I guess. Yeah, so when Elon bought Twitter a couple years back, he decided that he liked the name X enough from his PayPal days to rename it to the third to last letter of the alphabet. And I think he named one of his 40 offspring X as well, but I digress. Who gives a shit? But being an X Blue member is kind of like putting a huge target on your back, because there's a lot of scrutiny towards those who are willing to fork over money to Musk. Meaning you'll get a lot of sentiment of people calling those who have it right-wing cryptocurrency NFT scam vendors. Or at least that's the gist of it. The problem is not everyone who purchases Blue is trying to be any of those things that people label them. Actually, my reason for having it is because I had the sinking feeling that things were going to unfortunately be more reliant on having said membership, whether to curb the bot activity or to make things a smoother experience. I honestly think Elon wasn't sure what to do with it once he pulled the reins on the Twitter pony. Though once he did finally decide on what the whole point was, it's led to changes that have been for better or worse, an entirely new landscape of Twitter. Or X if you want to be anal about it. Well, whatever you're going to call it, I just found it necessary to purchase a Blue membership because these changes were going to affect the growth of my platform. Enough to where not having it would be detrimental as a whole, and since I haven't really thought about canceling it knowing how awful the freemium experience is, which meant more ads and Twitter view limits and restricted account access, that all sounded like hell I wanted no part of. So unfortunately, I was in a bind on that. Now, since having Blue, I haven't really had too many experiences with folks tearing me down. And actually, to some extent, I think it's helped a lot in getting people who normally wouldn't look at my renders to actually take notice, since they have the same Blue membership as well. Though lately I've been reading through some replies on a tweet, and I've noticed I can't interact with one tweet whatsoever if I wanted. So I'll click on the profile to see what's going on, only to find that I've been blocked by that person. Someone I've never even spoken to or interacted with. Just blocked without any cause. And from what I understand, the reason this happens is because a lot of the time people hate blue checkmarks enough to go out of their way to run a script that automatically blocks anyone with it. Doesn't matter if you're a VTuber, streamer, organization, etc., you will be blocked unless that person has set exceptions to that list. And because I don't have a way to really explain or tell them what's going on, that person who could be interested in my content will never see it because that script is actively being used. Don't get me wrong, I understand completely why you'd want to do something like that, but come on. Oh, God damn it. And really, that's not like a huge deal to me. I mean, if you're going to go out of your way to block everyone that uses blue because of a handful of bad apples that supposedly spoils the bunch, then maybe it's not worth trying to contact each person that automatically has been blocked. Because what I've noticed, unfortunately, as a side effect to all this, is the replies just being low effort content farms. Like, I'll see a reply that's totally unrelated to the content, or is just a low effort reply that doesn't really add anything to what's being shown above. And I think that's another aspect to it all that people just flat out hate about Twitter/X now. You can't escape the trash amongst the occasional little nuggets of worthwhile content on the platform. So I guess that's why a script like this tends to exist, even if it means punishing those who want to play this game fairly. Elon has been trying to get people to use less hashtags recently because he deems them to look ugly, and the algorithm will automatically somehow carry it along, like a barrage of unicorns and kittens down a rainbow slide in a Tesla Cybertruck. But that's just it. It doesn't work that way. Actually, it's totally the opposite from how Twitter used to work pre-Elon. And although the results were negotiable, that was the best way to get people to see what you've made on there. And now we're kind of just expected to let it all come together and work out eventually, like some bad sitcom or cheesy friendship movie. And I wish it could be that way, but Elon, Mr. Musk, we do not live in that kind of world. So going back into the whole being blocked thing, another odd change related to being blocked, as I mentioned earlier, is now you can just look at the profile that has you blocked, which totally defeats the purpose of blocking someone, by the way. And so now anyone with not so good intentions can just stalk someone should they so please. Like, how exactly does that work? It doesn't. Actually, I think it's a required feature for most social media platforms. And to have it work like the way it does now means that the block feature is now as useless as a restraining order. Well, I mean, maybe a restraining order is more useful in this context, but it didn't need to be like that. And not being able to see likes anymore. That's another wild change that should have been optional, but it wasn't, because Elon got caught liking spicy images. And if I had to guess, that's another huge issue of Elon having control of Twitter/X as a whole, because many of these changes seem like things that only he wants to implement, as far as I can tell. And when you tell him no, don't do that, that's a terrible idea, it goes from one ear out the other. Doesn't help that these toe suckers are at the top of the replies with blue check marks saying otherwise, so a lot of these changes end up happening regardless of what anyone else says. No vote held, nothing. Immediately done without any feedback being taken seriously. Which leads back to the main reason I wanted to make this video today, Elon Musk's massive ban wave that's been happening recently. Ever since he's taken over Twitter/X, he's been all about that freedom of speech, as we hear him shout from the rooftops each day, wanting to give the right side of the political spectrum a chance to speak at the table, to give equal footing for everyone at the table, if you will. Which, fine, you know, whatever, I don't really use Twitter/X for that purpose, but go off, I guess? Only problem is, how can you want that while also wanting to silence people who don't agree with your stance? Isn't that going against the philosophy you've been touting all this time since you've let that sink in all these years ago, Mr. Musk? I guess it shouldn't surprise anyone that he'd want to go this route, since he's always been seen as this eccentric, socially awkward billionaire who, up to this point, had a middling reputation as a whole. But now he's either considered a complete moron or an African-American hero for freedom, depending on who you ask. And the latter is starting to become more suspect now as the situation unfolds. To give a brief summary of what's been going on, HB1 visas are the fuss that's being made of as we speak. HB1s are like a temporary visa that allow these corporations to hire foreign workers from countries like India, for example, to specialty occupations, which would be jobs like in the tech industry or engineering. Normally to get one of these, you need to have a bachelor's degree or higher in that specialty occupation to be considered for an HB1 visa, which again are the fields that involve mathematics, medical sciences, technology, or engineering. The reason that Elon Musk is making a huge fuss about all this is due to the fact that the bar for the requirements are too high. So rather than having foreigners meet those requirements, he wants to essentially reform the way it all works, so that you don't need to have a bachelor's degree or higher to be considered for an HB1 visa. That your own merit should be more than enough for you to get hired from overseas to be a part of America, rather than putting in the effort necessary to actually get the visa. But why would he want that, might you ask? What is there to gain from letting just anyone be allowed to get that visa? From the data that's been gathered, it's mostly for cheap labor from what can be seen, or at least that's cheap for someone in that field normally. And if you know anything about America, we don't like it when they take our jobs.
They took our jobs! Ah!
So naturally, when people on the right weren't too keen about the idea of lowering those requirements nor letting HB1s remain a thing, Elon decided to strip those blue check marks because they were disagreeing with him, which, regardless of how you feel about the Musker, was not a good look at all. Doing so sent a ripple effect among those who noticed, questioning why their hero, who cried so much about freedom of speech, would act like this. And really, it's for the same reason why he was able to hide all those likes, ruin the point of the block feature, or trying to abolish hashtags. They let him get away with it. These same people that were sucking on his toes, eating up every tweet he put out mindlessly, and didn't question anything, now have to deal with the bed that they've made for themselves. It's like getting married to an abusive spouse who's had all the red flags from the beginning, yet you choose to take their hand in marriage, and now you want a divorce, despite it being your fault that you got in the mess in the first place. So, you get what you deserve. Now, like I said, I don't really care too much about Elon Musk. I mostly care about getting my content out there, sharing my thoughts whenever I can, or putting out a couple renders each month. This is a hobby, and maybe I want to become something more than just that. So, in order to do so, I have to bite the bullet knowing it's going to be good for me later in the long run, even if it sucks now. That's sort of how I see this Twitter X situation being. And if all the alternatives have come and gone, or currently kind of exist for now, it is hard for me to take a step away from it all, knowing that it's still the best place to really be seen, because even with Blue Sky existing, we again still use Twitter/X because at the moment it's imitation crab meat compared to the real whole crab you could be having. And that's just how I see it anyways. So I'm probably going to still be using it for quite some time, and the blue checkmark will still be there just the same, so as long as people continue to use it. Yes, Blue Sky is similar to how Twitter works in some ways, but honestly in some of the worst ways, and in ways that doesn't really solve the issues that plague Twitter now, such as the bots or AI scam baiters looking to make a quick buck. Not to mention, the only way to really get noticed on Blue Sky is to follow a ton of people who may or may not engage with your content long term anyways. It's just another social media platform that wants to be the replacement. But so far, it hasn't really proved itself as something more than just an imitation of a pre-Elon Twitter, with a lot of the same problems exacerbated. I'll still try to use it, I guess, but my feed is sort of all over the place now. It'll mainly be to reshare most of what I post on Twitter already anyways. Is Twitter going away anytime soon? No. Is there going to be a suitable replacement for it? Also probably no. I think the only thing we can really do is to try to adapt as best as we can, and kinda just hope for the best at this point it seems. Obviously Twitter isn't the only platform that has its fair share of issues. I think everything from YouTube to Twitch to Facebook could all use major improvements to the user experience. For better or worse, we're kinda stuck with it, with some small victories sprinkled around. What I can say for certain is if we speak up whenever we can, maybe someday they listen. It's better to try than to never try at all, I think. We can't really expect things to magically get better. We have to take whatever action we can to make the changes necessary that'll make a difference for all creators alike. That's not to say it'll happen overnight. Aside from sitting there and letting it happen, letting your voice be heard is another option that shouldn't be forgotten nor taken for granted. Alright, and that's it for the video. I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about for the end of the year video. I was kind of debating on whether I wanted to talk about Squid Games or something else entirely. But I figured, since it was relevant and Twitter has had its issues over the past couple of years, I figured I'd talk about them here and talk about the recent situation of Elon just because it was relevant enough to bring up. So anyways, be sure to give it a like and leave a comment if you have any suggestions or have any comments or feedback. I always appreciate it. And don't forget to subscribe. There's plenty more content where that came from. All right, take care. See you next year.